All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue our Semester 1 review notes. Last time we took a look at the first part of Module 1. Today we're going to finish Module 1. Please make sure you've got your name and number, as well as that title at the top. Now, we'll go ahead and we'll continue with the Roman numeral 1 just to make sure that it matches up with Module 1. I know that's a little unusual, we don't usually do that, but we'll go ahead and we'll just say that this is Module 1 continued, because that's what it is. Okay. Now, when we last left off, we were talking mostly about place value and things like that. Now we're going to start applying that and doing some addition and subtraction. Just like yesterday, I'm going to give you some problems. I'm going to ask you to pause. Solve the problem on your own. If you have any trouble, look back at notes, things like that, and then you can unpause the video to watch me finish it. Let's start with Lesson 9. Adding with decimals. Adding with decimals. Big thing here, this is in your review notes from before, just make sure that you're lining up those decimal points. Graph paper is your friend. Line up the decimal points. And actually, I'm going to add a little something. Line up the decimal points / place columns. Make sure, there we go, make sure that all the ones are lined up, all the tens, all the hundreds, and the same on the decimal side. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Again, I focus on the decimal point because that's usually the easiest way to line them up. All right, if I give you something that looks like this, 7 43/100 plus 12 1/10. We need to make sure that those decimals are lined up. Now, it doesn't matter which of these you put on top. Commutative property of addition says the order doesn't matter. I usually like to go with the longer one, but it really doesn't matter. The important thing, again, line up those decimals. Make sure that you start with that and then build out. It's really important to see that this does not have a hundredths, so there shouldn't be anything under here. Now, if that is annoying to you, you can always put the little invisible 0, the ghost 0. Okay. Go ahead and solve. Pause, add that up. Some of you are going to have it done by the time I finish talking. All right. I like to bring the decimal down immediately. 3 plus nothing is 3. 4 plus 1 is 5. 7 plus 2 is 9. And nothing plus 1 is 1. I could have put an invisible 0 up there too, but I think most of you are pretty accustomed to that sort of thing. You're used to that, so it's not a big deal. All right. That's addition. Lesson 10 was the same thing, just subtraction. Okay. Subtracting with decimals. Really? I keep saying it, it is the same thing. It is not that different. Once again, line up the decimal points, line up the decimal points and those place columns. Probably seems silly to write that again, but with addition and subtraction, it is super, super important. Do not forget. All right, let's go ahead. We'll use 15 3/10 minus 6 9/100. Okay. Now, there is no commutative property of subtraction. Order is very important here. the first number must go on the top. The first number must go on the top. I will go ahead and put the decimal point here. Again, I want to make sure it's lined up. And then I'll build this thing out around it. So there's the 6, the 0, 9. Okay. For subtracting this, I specifically picked one where you're going to have an empty spot up here. Uh-oh. I want you to think about what we talked about in class. I'm kind of giving you a hint. Think about what we need to do here. Pause the video, solve this problem, and then I'll walk you through it when you're done. Okay. Hopefully you got my not so subtle clue and put a 0 here. That 0 is to remind us that if I have nothing, I cannot give 9 away to my friends. I cannot take 9 away from nothing. I have to borrow. So I look over at the next column. The 3 becomes a 2. I'm going to take that 1/10 over here, and that's going to become 10 hundredths. So there's 10. 10 minus 9 is 1. 2 minus 0 is 2. I did not bring the decimal point straight down this time. I probably should have. I usually do. As long as I make sure I do it eventually and then it goes straight down, we're solid. All right, 5 minus 6 won't work, so I have to look at the entire 15. I can go ahead and borrow, but I mean, I haven't really changed a whole lot. 15 minus 6 is 9. 0 minus nothing is just 0. So 9 and 21 hundredths. Okay. Moving right along. Our next item is lesson 11. Lesson 11 is where we practiced how to multiply with models. And specifically, we used the area model. Okay. We used the area model. Now for the area model, what we did was we took something fairly simple, like let's say 5 times 2 and 78 hundredths. Okay. We went ahead, we drew a rectangle. Because so far, that's what we've spent most of our time finding the area of, right? We find the area of rectangles. We took the whole number, we put it here, and then we split this up. We saw, okay, I've got ones, tenths, and hundredths. So I'll break this into 3. If I have 2 ones, I have 7 tenths, and then I have 8 hundredths, and it gets a little hard to squeeze that in. Then I can multiply each of these together and get partial products. I'm not going to get the final answer, but I'm going to get a piece. Okay. Now I'm going to ask you to pause, go ahead and fill out this box, but don't worry about adding the whole thing together. We'll talk about that in a minute. Go ahead and pause, find each partial product. Okay. 8 times 2 is 16. Now it's important that we label it because we have to remember that this is 16 ones. For 8 times 7, same thing, 56 tenths. It's very important that we remember to label it. And 8 times 8 is 64, specifically 64 hundredths. Oof, I can barely get that in there. Now, we did a little practice with taking these and writing them as decimals, but it has been a while. Write each of these in standard form over here and then add them together. That will give us a complete and total answer. Go ahead and pause, Write them in standard form. That's just numbers, not ones, tenths, that kind of thing. We're not going to use the words. Write it in standard form and add them together. Okay. 16 ones is pretty easy. It's just 16. Now I am going to put a decimal point there, just like I keep saying, we have to build everything around those decimal points. 56 tenths might be a little trickier because you know you can't put 56 in one column. We want to make sure the last digit is in whatever column this label is. So if this is tenths, then the 6 needs to be in the tenths. Everything else is just going to scoot over into the next column to the left. Think of this as being 50 tenths. 50 tenths, well, every group of 10 is a solid 1, so that would be 5 ones, 5 wholes. 64 hundredths will work very similarly. We've got our tenths place, our hundredths place. The 4 goes in the hundredths place. The 6 goes in the tenths. There is nothing here. Okay. Now we can go ahead and add these partial products, these pieces, together to get the entire product, if my pencil will stop breaking. As always, if you like to put the ghost zeros in, you certainly can, but it's not strictly necessary. Graph paper will help with this. Nothing plus 4 is 4. Nothing plus 6 is 6, plus another 6 is 12. Let's carry the 1. And I better make sure I bring that decimal point down. I don't want to forget. 1 plus 5 is 6. I'm using the associative property because if I make 2 6s, I know that that is 12. Carry the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 6 is 7. 7 plus 5 is 12. Obviously, that works also. Okay, so the answer, I'll box it up, should be 22 and 24 hundredths. Very good. All right, go ahead and zoom a little bit so we can leave that on the screen. We're almost done. We're going to do a little bit of estimation, but I'm not going to leave you with a ton of this. I want to make sure we talk about this in class since estimating is often a pain. Okay. 2 big things here. Again, nothing you're really going to need to work on your own, just 2 things to keep in mind. If rounding a decimal, and please remember the difference between rounding and estimating. Rounding comes first. Rounding is when you change 1 or more numbers to make them easy to work with. Estimating is when you actually work with them. If you're rounding a decimal, your best bet is almost always going to be round to the nearest whole. Essentially, you're rounding to the ones place. Okay. So if I take this number from up here, 2 and 78 hundredths, okay, 2 and 78 hundredths, and I want to round it, I want to change it, I would just look to the ones place. There's a 2. Look next door. The neighbor is 5 or more, so the 2 will soar. 2 and 78 hundredths is going to be pretty close to 3. Obviously not exactly. Okay. Now, if you are rounding a whole number, it does work a little different. If you're rounding a whole number, now we've talked in class and you'll see there are different ways to do this. Okay. There really is not a one strategy fits all situations kind of thing here. But generally speaking, go ahead and round to the highest place value. When we do estimating with division, we talk about compatible numbers. You see this doesn't always work, but again, for right now, you can think of it that way. If I give you 63,942, the highest place value is the 10,000s. If I look next door, its neighbor is 4 or less, so that means the 6 will rest. So I'll round that to be approximately 60,000. Okay. All right, last one for these notes today. I don't know about you, but I am running out of paper. The last part of this module that we went over was dividing decimals using units. Now, I am mostly writing this for sake of completion. We're not going to spend a ton of time on this in class because really we've moved on. You've done actual decimal division. This can be a helpful tool to go back and look at it again, but for the most part. Basically what this is saying is if I have something like this, 4 9/10 divided by 7. I can think of that, similar to what we talked about for lesson 11, I can think of that 4.9, 4 9/10, as 49/10. Divide that into 7 groups, well, that's a little bit easier to see. 49 divided by 7 is 7. Now it's technically 7/10, which means our real true answer should be written like that. Thank you, pencil. Now, again, I went through that at light speed. We'll discuss it briefly in class, but for the most part, we've done actual division with decimals, so I'm guessing most of you will probably just want to do that. All right, that'll be it for these notes. I will give my standard disclaimer. If you have any questions or concerns, please make sure you put them on a sticky note or write them here somewhere where you can come back to them and we will discuss in class. All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I will see you then.